Welcome back to Virteva's Let's Talk podcast. We're live in Chicago from Microsoft Ignite. Chris and I had just finished walking the floor. It's Thursday, the 21st. And, this is going to be a special kind of short podcast. Well, we always say they're short, Chris, but they might be short. But yeah, we're doing a live from the hotel room. We're at the JW Marriott. We're really kind of just going to be recapping the biggest stories, at least that we thought we went through at Ignite this year. And, kind of giving it to you live. And then over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be breaking down some of these topics a little bit more in depth. So, Chris, let's just jump right into it. I think that overall thoughts and feelings on Ignite. So, for me, attending last year in Seattle, everything was Copilot. I think people were kind of sick of Copilot. This year, it was a lot of the same. But I think that the big difference was last year they were announcing all the new Copilot products and features and everything that it was going to do. And they were kind of telling us what the price might be, but they didn't quite tell us yet. We learned that about a month later. This year, the big difference is they didn't really announce a lot of new features and services. It felt more iterative. And I don't want to make that sound like it's a bad thing. But at the same point, it really seemed like they had a much bigger focus on security this year. And everything that we were hearing from our customers as we were doing our expeditionary packages this year is just, how do I actually know what Copilot can see? How do I right-size my permissions when there's oversharing problems? And, how do I look at my data and understand what I need to do? And there was a big focus on that, especially, and we'll talk about SharePoint Advanced Management here in a moment. But the big focus really seemed to be is they want to make it easier for you to secure your own data so they can, of course, sell more licenses.
Well, I would classify sort of, as you noted, as refinement, iterative enhancement of Copilot to make sure that it is a lot more applicable to everyone. That seemed to clearly be the aim this year, was to really, now that it's out, now that it's accessible to people, make it and refine it in a way that it is going to have as much value to each individual in any kind of scenario as possible. And so it was good to see a lot of how they moved into all those different directions to accommodate or account for all those different types of personas that may encounter Copilot, and make it more practical for companies to more justifiably purchase it for all of the users that they may have in their type of company. And then, of course, obviously, on the other side of that, making sure that there was enhancements to the security and compliance side of things to also simultaneously prevent it from also being a liability to companies, and giving them more visibility and control over how all of the Copilot exposure, data risk, data governance, all of that came together.
Before we focus in on kind of like the new features that are coming to Copilot, I think that security is kind of top of mind. So we'll start kind of our first YouTube chapter with that this week. I want to talk about the CrowdStrike incident again. And I know that we've kind of belabored this and we beat it into the ground, and some of our customers that use it are probably tired of us, kicking a dead horse. But Microsoft is making some big changes this year. Some of those changes are their kind of secure future initiative that they've been talking about for quite some time now. And forgive you all, I'm pulling up. I just want to make sure that we can see it. So part of the secure future initiative is that they're really going out there with a security first mindset. And with that mindset, they're kind of developing their own kind of hackathon, specifically aimed at their own operating system and their own features and different programs out there. So they're kind of encouraging people to come together. There's going to be a big prize pool on this. It's kind of starting next year. And, they want to, when you make your own product, it's hard to find what's wrong. Like, we see this all the time when we design our own stuff internally is, we think that it's perfect and it's going to work well for us. And then we sit down and we put surveys out there after the fact, and we work with customers, and they tell us, well, this is what I would do different. Maybe make this a little bit shorter, maybe make this a little bit longer, maybe include some more video content, give us some more leave behind. This is what Microsoft is doing, but they're doing it in a security context with this hackathon. So they're incentivizing people to kind of, come to break our stuff. And they do this. They do this even outside of this. They normally will do kind of like these bug tests and pen tests and try to see people can kind of come together. But they're making this more of kind of a year-long initiative, to my understanding, because they really want people to beat up the OS. And I mean, to me, looking at it positively. I think it was great. I think that they should do it. This is a great opportunity for people out there that are either enthusiasts, gamers, or just kind of started their professional careers, or maybe they're even pretty far along in their professional career and they've seen some of this stuff and they want to make improvements to it. But kind of like where my eyeball goes when I start to look over the horizon is they're going to start beating up Windows 11 now, I think. And this is all going to be kind of in the, hey, we're getting ready to move to Windows 12 at some point in the next few years, or whatever they call it. Yeah, whatever they call it. They want to start kind of beating this up and making sure that they do as good of a job. And I think that the big kind of change from Windows 10 to Windows 11 was it did have more security features in mind. But now I think with Windows 12 or whatever they're going to call it is it's going to be more of an AI focused OS, which is Windows 11 is trying to get there, but they're just kind of cobbling it together right now. So I think that this is kind of where they're leading with this, on top of, they also want to try and prevent things from this CrowdStrike incident from happening, which leads us into the next piece, which is the Windows Resiliency Initiative, which is their initiative that is supposed to help prevent another big kind of crack basket disaster, like what happened in July of 2024. So there's some major things that are coming. And forgive me as I kind of read these off here, but they're actively trying to make Windows platform improvements to strengthen the controls on apps and drivers, while also allowing some of these third-party antivirus providers and really the CrowdStrikes of the world, I should say, there's plenty of them out there, to operate their antivirus software and their scanning software outside of the kernel. So we kind of knew that this was coming. We've been talking about it for a couple of months on the podcast. We've been talking about it in newsletters. We've been talking about it with our customers. This is something that was unavailable. The kernel was unavailable up until about, 2006, I think, the Vista years, somewhere around there, yeah. And then Microsoft kind of got their arm twisted in the EU and said, hey, no, you have to make it available. So I think Microsoft is trying to make as many compromises as they can. They didn't go into a ton of detail if they're completely kicking everyone out of the kernel, but it certainly sounds that way. We were just checking the CrowdStrike blog and press releases right before we started recording here to see, hey, has anyone, made any noise about how terrible this is? I mean, Microsoft had their security summit in September. They invited all the major players to the ball, really, to kind of talk through this and understand, hey, how do we fix this? So you have to assume that the McAfees, the CrowdStrikes, the BitTitans of the world, all these different kind of, or Bitdefenders of the world, they all had the opportunity to, kind of give their feedback on this about what's the right way to address it. So more is going to unfold over time, and I'm certainly that this is a topic that you and I will talk about on a future show. But again, this is probably coming sometime in 2025. I don't think it's coming in January, but it is probably going to start to come over the coming months as they start to tighten up security in an effort to, again, make sure that we don't have every airport hospital in the country that's using CrowdStrike or another similar product kind of go down due to, like a Windows update or a drag bug or so. Conflicts are, yeah, right. Yep. Do you want to talk about some of the new Copilot features?
Yeah, well, the big theme this year was agents, and the term that seems to have been invented around all of the agent functionality in AI generally, but certainly in a Copilot context, agent. And it's, again, in line with a lot of the evolutionary aspects and refinement of Copilot, I think, and enabling users to build with either small or very complex workflows and have those automate for very frequent or common or even obscure tasks that once they would have relied on their own manual efforts to perform, but now being able to build those workflows without having to know how to write code, or even in a low code context, use natural language to describe what you're trying to do, how you want it to act, or take sequential steps for any given series of workflow type of events. And from there, it writes all of the low code, or that agent will execute those steps as needed. So it should, I think, have a fairly substantial value proposition as people at least learn and understand as it becomes available how to interact and create these agentic models. And it seems like that's where a lot of AI sophistication is likely to come in, is not just something you chat with, but to have it actually execute sequences of events and do all these agentic model-based scenarios. So it'll be interesting to see how that takes off.
And I think a lot of the agentic stuff kind of came out too. So like the biggest thing that we hear when we're kind of doing like our phase one workshop, where we're doing pilots and helping customers, is no matter how much we kind of helped people and train them and show them the right way to build strong prompts, is it always kind of came back down to, well, I'm going to type in 3 things and hope for the best. And we saw this on the show floor this year. We did the postcard booth here where you kind of build your own AI generated face. And I took the ride on the security Copilot spaceship. And same thing is they're helping you build prompts. Copilot Lab has improved quite a bit. We saw that on the show floor this year as well, is where they are actually trying to feed you the right steps and give you more prompt examples. So you're not just starting with that white text box and having to figure it all out yourself. Microsoft is also introducing, I think it was, 4 of their own models here, maybe even a little bit more. So Agents in SharePoint we knew about. So Agents in SharePoint is basically, you go to a SharePoint site, you click, I want to add a Copilot directly to this site, an agent. And then what it can do is it can scan everything that's on the pages on your SharePoint site. Coming soon, and I attended the Q&A on this a couple of months ago, is it's also going to be able to look at all of the files in your document library and look at the text in those, as long as Copilot can read them. So it has to be like a Word document, a PowerPoint, a PDF. And you'll be able to actually, and this is a great training use case, and there's a lot of other use cases for it, but like, so imagine you're bringing someone new onto the team and you need to get them up to speed, and right now it takes you 6 weeks to train that person. Well, what if you could turn that training program into 2 weeks and then give them a Copilot agent to ask questions to, and it could refer to all of your training documentation, your procedures, your standards, stuff like that. This is kind of the first step. They announced this back in September, but they gave us a little bit more knowledge on it. But this is cool. This is starting to roll out right now, I believe, for SharePoint, and it should hit most organizations by end of January in full GA. Some of the other stuff that's coming, so very similar to what we were just talking about, is employee self-service agents. And the way that these are supposed to work is, so when you go to the biz chat function or the business chat function in Microsoft Teams, or you go to copilot.microsoft.com under your enterprise login.
Now Microsoft365.com/chat.
Yes. So they keep changing it, along with the interpreter agent. And what facilitator agent is kind of what they announced back in, once it was May or June, the Teams team Copilot, where it kind of sits in your meetings and it can respond to tasks and it can build things out. You can ask it questions, and it almost acts like a real person. I think that the name Teams Copilot is a little confusing, and maybe that's why they kind of changed it to the facilitator agent, which is a terrible name, by the way. They could have given it a slightly better name. I don't have a suggestion.
It is facilitating.
It is facilitating, but it doesn't roll off the tongue like you think that it should. But Microsoft has never been good at naming things or branding them, because they're also renaming Microsoft 365 to Microsoft Copilot, or the Copilot icons getting an M365 on the bottom of it. But we're not going to get into that today, because I'm frustrated because they just keep rebranding this brand. The interpreter agent for Teams. So this is pretty cool. So it's you're in a meeting full of Spanish speaking folks. Maybe you're working with a company that's international and they're new to you and they're looking for support, but you don't speak fluent Spanish. Is you can actually, so this kind of goes 2 ways, is you can talk and then Copilot will use your voice and actually translate that to Spanish. We saw it happen live. It was really cool. And then same thing other way around, is it can interpret it on the other side, and it can also do the same thing back to you. Again, you do need a Copilot license for that to work. Microsoft 365 Copilot license. But, it's a neat new feature. And again, this is them finding use cases based on stuff that they have heard throughout the year.
Well, and I would argue, too, that that's going to have hopefully significant value and be something that, again, in that spirit of enhancing the value that Copilot brings to make it applicable to more users within an organization, certainly any international organization that has employees from multiple different parts of the globe, or I could see it in education scenarios, many other situations where that real-time ability to have your voice or everything, all the words that you're speaking, not only be re-spoken in a different language, but to have it sound like you still, it's pretty amazing. And I'm excited about how much that could have a profound impact on everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And the last one I want to talk about is very kind of similar in the same vein of kind of like the Teams agent, is a project management agent or a project manager agent where it will actually help build kind of like the swim lanes and the task lanes and follow up on stuff for you to kind of help you as a project manager. So it's almost, they should have called it a project coordinator agent, because I don't think that the project manager Copilot agent is going to be able to do the job of project manager. Although our own engagement manager, Chris Taylor, we'll test with him and see what he says.
Yep. We should get to the box, because you got to say something about the box.
So I want to talk about the box, but there was one more thing that I kind of wanted to talk about here.
Well, I'll do a quick shout out while he's looking that up for data security posture management. That was also part of the announcements this week in Microsoft Purview, so the compliance platform associated with M365, and the ability to use the data security platform aspect within the Purview Admin Center to get a much, much more robust understanding of all of the different ways Copilot in particular is being used within an organization. The interactivity it has to be able to decipher sensitivity label attributes and where those all of that data is occurring, where those interactions are occurring, how people are prompting Copilot, if anything that they're prompting it with would trigger any DLP policies or other data risk scenarios. It's something that was badly needed, and it's good to see them introduce that, because I think that's going to have a pretty profound impact on the security side of companies feeling that much more comfortable introducing things like Copilot into their environment and that AI construct, knowing that they'll have a lot better visibility by default going forward. So another very important announcement.
So that's actually what I was leading into, and I couldn't find it. But you triggered a format. I remember. So for those of you that remember Microsoft Syntax was rebranded to SharePoint Advanced Management about a year ago. Partially, about 6 to 8 months ago. So some of the stuff got split off into its own thing still with Azure. Some of it got split off specifically for SharePoint. But one of the biggest announcements of the show that I think kind of went under the radar is that if you have just one Copilot license in your environment, you now get SharePoint Advanced Management for free for the entire organization. Previously, it was every single person in the organization needed to have a license. And the license were like $2.50 a month or something like that. They were pretty expensive. So now if you just have one agent or one Copilot license, you get that free. Adding on to that, the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, including Teams Admin Center, the Exchange Admin Center, and SharePoint, are also, if you have one Copilot license within your org, you are getting access to a Copilot agent starting at the end of January directly in those 3 to 4 admin centers that you can. Are there any service events going on? Can you give me a history of past service events? Can you tell me if I have a group that doesn't have an owner belonging to it? Can you help me find, kind of getting back to the data posture pieces, can you help me find groups that are oversharing files, or are there people in groups that, they have just kind of, they're not inheriting permissions from the group. Someone just said, oh, hey, yeah, we can give this one person access to these files. So that's going to be huge. I wish we could go back in time, because this was one of the things that we talked about over the summer with some of the SEP workshops that we did. And, we really kind of went slide by slide by slide. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. There's a new function in there for bulk edit actions, where if you say you find 46 users that are over permissioned, or you find 46 sites that have sensitive data on them based on the criteria that you build in your prompt, is it will actually say, hey, you want us to just lock those down with SharePoint Advanced Management and restrict access to them. You used to have to build a CSV file for this. You used to have to go into PowerShell and run it and update it regularly if you were building new sites. Now you just can do it right from a prompt. That's amazing. That's a huge win. I really think that went under the radar with probably a lot more people that were just focused on modern work. But SharePoint administrators and security administrators that attended this week are probably loving it just as much as we are.
Yep.
Chris, you want to talk about Copilot actions? Copilot actions.
No.
You don't know what Copilot actions is. All right. So I'm going to go through Copilot actions here. So Copilot actions is a new kind of product or service that's coming with Copilot. And what Copilot actions does is it allows you to create easily repeatable events. The way that Satya Nadella kind of talked about this was think about Copilot Actions as creating a mail rule that does 3 or 4 different things. And what actions can do is kind of the same thing. So if you wanted to, you could create an action that at the beginning of every day is it looked at your calendar, it told you what was on there, it helped you prepare for that stuff, it sent you any relevant notes that you needed to have. And you can do this with more than just that. You remember what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I sort of lumped that into the agent aspect, I suppose, in my head. Yeah.
Copilot Actions, think about it as kind of almost like building a macro in Copilot. Now, it's not a macro, and macros are generally, kind of frowned upon, especially now. Use those VBS macros out there anymore, folks. Microsoft goes out of their way to prevent you from using them. But yeah, we'll put a little bit of video overlay so you can kind of see what it is and kind of get a better idea. But again, this is Microsoft looking at the past year of feedback and understanding that users need to find more value in Copilot, and they're building this actions piece out to add that value and try to build you more reasons to come and adopt if you already haven't. So the last thing we're going to talk about, one more thing on security before we go.
You bet.
We should have covered this earlier. One of the coolest features that they announced, and they've been talking about this for a while, is Windows 11 is getting the ability to receive hot fixes for critical security updates. So Windows Hot Patch, if you're familiar with hot patching from using different programs out there, maybe you're a gamer, maybe you do a lot of coding, hot patches will allow you to update something that's live without a reboot. So you see this happen a lot in video games if you play like online games and there's something like a weapon is broken or someone's like clipping through the ground. Is a lot of times game companies can fix that without having to change the majority of the code in the operating system or touch other pieces of code. They can just kind of narrow down to that one thing and fix it. I think that it's going to be used in, here and there situations. It's not going to be all the time. It's not going to replace Patch Tuesdays, for example. But if there's a critical problem out there with a piece of Windows software, whether it's relating to drivers, kernel features, etc., is Microsoft will be able to fix that without having to make everybody restart their computers. Again, this is something that probably could have been done during the CrowdStrike event to kind of like update registry files to potentially, stop computers when they did reboot from not being able to reboot again.
Yeah, my bigger takeaway from it was just the idea that it's going to make any patch cycle, hopefully, that is able to leverage hot patch for primarily Windows patches, obviously, that much less disruptive to users. They can push those patches now. The other aspect of the announcement was the idea that the patches themselves can now be distributed and installed significantly faster. I think it was 16+% faster on average. And so even if it doesn't have a profound impact on how the patches work or anything, just the ability to apply them without that reboot, without the classic prompt that stops you from having to, they might interrupt everything that you're trying to do in your middle of a presentation. Oh, you got to reboot your computer within the next 1 hour. Some of that then is less necessary.
It doesn't mean that you should leave your computer up for 365 days.
That is true. Yes.
We definitely run across that quite a bit. All right, so last thing we're going to talk about here, and again, we did not cover everything. We've been walking around for 3 days at this conference, talking with people, meeting with partners. There's no way that we could have covered every single announcement. Again, keep an eyeball on our newsletter, keep an eyeball on our website and on our blogs. We'll continue to talk about this stuff on the podcast as well. The last thing that we wanted to talk about is Microsoft has been trying to make a big push with Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 for a couple of years now. They are further enabling that with customers by introducing their own version of kind of like a thin client, you could call it, essentially, called Windows 365 Link. It is a new device. It's kind of like a mini PC that streams directly to connect you to your Win 365 VM. There's no OS on it. You can't really do a whole lot with it. You can control it as an administrator with Microsoft Intune. You very well should be able to do. And it only is going to cost $350. So think about putting a few of these out, like maybe in retail. Think about putting them out like at hotel desks so you can just dial into them. I know what the frontline workers use too is you can have, but I think it's 3 people can use the same device.
It's 365, yeah.
Yep. So this is going to further enable it. This again, $350, and it's coming out in April of 2025. Anything you wanted to add?
It's a neat path and should allow for hopefully a little bit more consideration of when cloud-based operating system models like Windows 365 without having to worry about the hardware itself being an oddity in the middle where you're having to spend a lot of money for something that could run a local operating system, but you're still intending to run a cloud operating system. Well, this one's purpose-built for that. And I think the other big value element that it brings is that ability to use Windows Hello authentication natively with it, so that from a secure passwordless or a passkey-based authentication mechanism or model, it makes these that much more practical to distribute. And I know you mentioned for certain scenarios, I think Microsoft has bigger idea here that companies maybe over time distribute these much more widely to all, even knowledge workers that then just use Windows 365 as their primary OS, and have these kiosks or hotel-based cubicles where they can just log in and get right to it. And you're not buying $1,000 laptops anymore for your employees at that point. It's just a small little box that can hang off the back of the monitor. So it's pretty slick. Interesting to see where that goes.
Yep. Well, that's all I've got. Again, there was a lot more stuff announced. Keep an eyeball on our website. If you are a Microsoft 365 customer today, you're looking for help implementing some of these new features, especially Copilot. We've talked basically all about Copilot today. We are an implementation partner. We can help you kind of take your first steps, either learning about it, kind of soup to nuts from the beginning, or if you need help implementing it, doing pilots, doing trainings, we can help with all of that stuff. You can reach out to us by emailing us at letstalk@virteva.com or by visiting our website at www.virteva.com. Chris, anything else?
No, that's good. Fun conference though. Well attended, and really great job by Microsoft and everything they put out today, or this week, I should say.
Yep. All right, take it easy, y'all. Bye.